is the experience of being taken or leaving this dimension.
We have hundreds and thousands of people who are coming forward and saying that the abduction phenomenon has happened to them.
I'm the first to admit that it all just sounds outrageous. It all sounds just crazy, and yet the evidence is there behind it.
She asked me, did I want to meet Bud Hopkins? And I said, who's he?
I'm freaking out. I'm like, what the heck is this?
I believe that the object that I saw was extraterrestrial.
These objects would hover, they would dart very quickly one way or the other.
I've never seen anything like that.
It looked like someone was shining a very bright light on a piece of aluminum.
The craft is disc-shaped, probably bigger than a 747, and it arced over the top of our car. Then there was a third object even behind the first two.
So it came across and just stopped. It went back the direction it came from. This light went like this.
Where they're from, you can only speculate. I have seen alien vehicles on 8 occasions.
It was quite big actually, and then there was little ones all around it. We saw something silver, and then we quickly ran to the lounge.
It was spotted almost a year ago, an unidentified flying object.
The person is in the car or sleeping, and then there's a light, these entities come into the room, they feel themselves paralyzed, they're moved, they're taken, they go into a ship, something happens there, there may be other people there, they have telepathic communication with the aliens, there's some probing, there's a whole complicated set of events that takes place, which is consistent from one person to another.
I couldn't move, and then I was freaking out. I mean,
it was like he couldn't even hear me. He didn't look at me. His eyes were just like straight ahead. And the light was all around us at that time.
I will be in bed and I will somehow sense fear. I'll sense something in the room. And at some point, I can't move.
I couldn't move my head left or right, but I could kind of look down at the foot of the bed, and I saw people standing at the foot of my bed.
I see these eyes are just looking right through me. And then I don't remember anything. I woke up the following morning.
They're coming.
And yet there's nothing I can do. I'm just here. I'm not in control of it at this point in time.
Skin, very dry to the touch, and I don't really remember how, but suddenly we were sort of floating.
Very tall, probably about 7 foot tall.
Very tall and very thin and very scary, and sometimes almost like an insect.
I knew my back was open because I could feel. So
You find yourself on a table and these creatures around you with instruments.
There is the experience of being taken or leaving this dimension.
Did they describe these experiences or these events like a person talks about something that has happened to them?
I'd heard about strange mutilation of cattle in the United States.
It's real. Animals are dying and animals are being mutilated.
This is serious. The feds need to investigate this and nobody's investigating.
One or both ears are cleanly removed.
Lack of blood. There's no blood anywhere.
The tongue is removed from the root.
It's a serial killer. That's what it is.
One or both eyes are removed.
So clearly, it dropped from a height into the fresh snow.
Organs removed from the throat, such as the larynx and esophagus.
We need to bring somebody to justice and solve some of these crimes. If you'll mutilate an animal or kill an animal, you will probably mutilate a human being.
The cattle mutilations I've discovered in my research are nothing more than what's left after the government does its secret tests on the low-level radiation leakage from its atomic weapons assembly plants and atomic power plants. It's a low-level radiation monitoring project.
This would be exactly what you would do if you wanted to find out the impact of pollution on the world.
Special security clearance that revealed to you certain documents, or were revealed to you, or that you saw relating to this very cover-up.
To this and many other things. I was eventually trained by Naval Security and Intelligence, and I was given a secondary NEC, which is Naval Enlisted Code, which was 9545, which is Internal Security Specialist. And an Internal Security Specialist is someone who protects classified information. It protects areas, so to speak. And I had a specialty, which I was trained in, which was Pacific Area Intelligence Briefings. And I was eventually assigned to the Commander-in-Chief of the United States Pacific Fleet, who was Admiral Bernard Clary at that time, and served as a member of his intelligence briefing team. And what you do is what we did was we prepared an updated briefing on everything that was happening in his half of the world, which he commanded the naval forces and marine forces, as a matter of fact. Now, to be able to function in this job, I had to have a security clearance, which gave me access to the information that I had to need to know to help prepare these briefings. What I eventually ended up with was a top secret Q clearance with an SCI attachment, which means sensitive compartmentalized information, and there were no blocks. In other words, there was nothing confining me to only certain compartmentalized information. I had access to whatever the Admiral and his staff had access to, because we had to prepare briefings and brief these people on all of these things. And I'm sure that at first I was tested and wasn't shown a whole lot, but eventually when they began to have confidence in me, I began to see things coming across my desk that were just absolutely incredible. And a lot of it is really hard to talk about because it's so far outside the normal concept of reality for the average American that they're going to find a hard time believing any of it. Mm-hmm. But I saw documents that were labeled under the classification top secret, and the compartmentalized, the compartment that was put into was called MAGIC, M-A-J-I-C, mm-hmm. Which told me that UFOs are real, which I already knew. I'd seen one. Right. But this went farther than that. It told me that they were extraterrestrial in origin, that there were 4 different extraterrestrial species or races visiting this Earth, and that they had actually entered into an agreement with the United States government with one of these species of alien beings to exchange technology, and it told me all the projects that was underneath this. I also saw documents under an operation called Operation Majority, which outlined the plans to bring together a one-world government. It also included extraterrestrial information within that. And another project called Project Aquarius, which was the accumulation of the whole history of alien interaction on planet Earth. But I have to say at this point that I don't know if those documents were really telling the truth or not. They could have been showing me these things so that eventually I would go out and talk about this. And maybe that'll become clear to you later why they may have done that. But I have to say at this point that I don't know if those documents were really telling the truth or not. They could have been showing me these things so that eventually I would go out and talk about this. And maybe that'll become clear to you later why they may have done that.
You gained a special security clearance.
What do you think about aliens?
I don't think there are any. At one time, I thought that there were, simply based upon documents that I'd seen while I was attached to the intelligence briefing team, the Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet. At that time, and even for many years afterwards, I did not believe that the government would use me in that way. I had devoted my whole life to government service. I had been in the Air Force, I was in the Navy, I was a river patrol boat captain in Vietnam. I had proved myself. I had combat ribbons with the V for Valor. There was no doubt of my loyalty to my country. And maybe that's why it was so easy to use me, because I wouldn't doubt that what I saw was real. But over the years, I've done a lot of research. And what I've discovered is there's no proof existing anywhere that extraterrestrials are real, or that have ever visited this planet, or that they exist anywhere in the universe. There is not one shred of evidence anywhere. There is lots of evidence, tons of it in fact, that there are a group of people collectively known as the Illuminati who want us to believe in some extraterrestrial threat from space so that they can cause a world government, bringing together of all the people to resist that external threat. And the first time that I saw any reference to that, I was reading some papers from the Carnegie Endowment Fund, and there was a record of a speech. It was a dinner for Viscount Nishiki of the Japanese delegation, the Japanese imperial delegation, in 1917. And John Dewey was one of the speakers. And the first sentence out of his mouth as I was reading this, I almost fell out of my chair. Because this was in 1917, and he said the best way to cause all people of the world to come together in one world government and end war forever would be if we were attacked by some other species from some other planet. And boy, that just clicked with me, and I knew that this is just another scam. This is the age of deception. There's no doubt about it. And then 8 times during Reagan's administration, he inserted almost the exact same phrase into 8 of his speeches. And it's a scam. That's what I can tell you. What they call UFOs, these crafts that fly around the sky, are real. But they're not piloted by some little green guy from some other planet. They're owned and operated by the United States of America for one, the Soviet Union for another, probably Great Britain, Canada. So the technology is real.
different secret space programs. There are 2 different space programs. One is what the public gets to see, which is overseen by NASA. And the other one is a secret space program that nobody gets to see, which is really overseen by the Navy Department under specialized, compartmentalized black projects. And what these people are doing in secret is just absolutely incredible.
On July 16, 1969, America held its breath.
10, 9, ignition sequence start. 6, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Apollo 11 blasted into space, beginning its 250,000-mile journey to the moon. During their 8-day voyage, the Apollo 11 astronauts saw spectacular views of the Earth, floated in a weightless environment, and supposedly went where no man had gone before.
Guys looking good, down a half. Lights on, picking up some dust. 4 forward, drift into the right a little. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. We copy you down, Eagle. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
But did it? Did they really land on the moon? Most of us think so. Millions of people watched on television as the lunar lander touched down, and these unforgettable words were spoken.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Bill Casing was an analyst and engineer at Rocketdyne, the company that designed the Apollo rockets.
There were many problems that evolved during the 60s that led people to believe that we're never going to make it to the moon.
The chances of getting to the moon and returning safely to Earth were something like 0.0017%. In other words, virtually an impossibility.
And of course, this brings up the subject of the death of whistleblowers. Men like Gus Grissom, who was burned to death along with Chafee and White.
He went pretty open with putting a lemon on
Yeah, he was going to give an interview about what he really thought about Apollo. And as you say, he hung a lemon on the command capsule on the day that he was murdered. And we should also look at Scott Grissom, his son's evidence that a secret switch was installed in the capsule to ignite the fire that killed Grissom, Chafee, and White. We could go on for quite a while about the death and injury to people that have pursued this Apollo hoax subject very diligently.
They went to a NASA spokesman who was Brian Welch.
Oh yes,
and
right.
They asked him about some of these anomalies.
Right.
You recall what he said about some of the things?
Well, he tried to dispute everything that the Apollo hoax advocates brought out. But the interesting thing is that about a month after he gave this interview, he was dead.
That always kind of puzzled me because he was at least trying to hold on to it, right? So
Do you think they would have actually killed him just because he didn't do a good enough job? Or?
Yes, I think that's what happened. He didn't do a good enough job. So they killed him as an example to other people who are defending, like Richard Hoagland. Hoagland obviously is a fake.
Virgil Gus Grissom was selected as one of the original 7 astronauts. A family man and a veteran of several space flights, he was a national hero and was likely to be the first man to walk on the moon. But Grissom was also an outspoken critic of the space program and was quoted as saying, "Someone's going to get killed." Unfortunately, Grissom's worst fears were soon realized. On January 27, 1967, 2 years before the first moon landing, Grissom and his crew boarded the Apollo 1 capsule for a full-scale simulation. The problems began almost immediately. First, the capsule's communication systems failed.
You copy? No, I didn't read you, Chuck, at all. I can't read you, Chuck. You want to try the phone? Yeah, we gotta get the moon. We can't talk between 3 buildings. I can't hear what you're saying.
Suddenly, the capsule burst into flames with the astronauts sealed inside. Tragically, Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger Chaffee lost their lives before ever leaving the launch pad. Gus Grissom's family believes the Apollo 1 fire was no accident.
I think it was intentionally sabotaged by someone. It's been a question in my mind, what was found in the accident investigation and how was that handled? Was the CIA involved or whoever? But it was done intentionally.
Grissom's family doesn't know who was responsible for his death or why it happened. But they say NASA knows the truth.
Gus gave his life for this program, and I feel like that it is up to NASA to come forward and give us a direct answer to what really happened.
Were Gus Grissom and the Apollo 1 astronauts victims of a tragic accident? Or were they intentionally silenced because they knew too much? We may never know. The cause of the fire is still a mystery, and the capsule remains locked away at a military base. But Grissom wasn't the only Apollo critic to meet with a suspicious and untimely death. Thomas Ronald Barron was a safety inspector during Apollo 1's construction. After the fire, Barron testified before Congress that the Apollo program was in such disarray that the United States would never make it to the moon. He claimed his opinions made him a target.
Has there been any pressure on you by NASA?
Nothing. We were, my wife and I were somewhat harassed at home when the first thing broke some time back, but it's gone away now.
As part of his testimony, Barron submitted a 500-page report detailing his findings.
There was a real fear that the program could be stopped dead in its tracks.
Then exactly 1 week after he testified, Barron's car was struck by a train. Barron, his wife, and stepdaughter were killed instantly.
I believe that Thomas Ronald Barron was murdered because he had the truth to tell about the Apollo project.
Barron's report mysteriously disappeared, and to this day, it has never been found. But the Apollo program continued, and so did the string of untimely deaths. Between 1964 and 1967, a total of 10 astronauts lost their lives in freak accidents. These deaths accounted for an astonishing 15% of NASA's astronaut corps.
to keep something that's alive wrapped up and covered over, you've got to eliminate all the people that can talk about it.
Could the government have gone this far to pull off such an elaborate hoax?
Regarding the Apollo mission, I can't say 100% for sure whether these men walked on the moon.
Brian O'Leary was a NASA astronaut in the 1960s and served as a science advisor during the Apollo moon missions.
It's possible that NASA could have covered it up just in order to cut corners and to be the first to allegedly go to the moon.
3 decades ago, when the world watched Apollo's lunar landings, Bill Kaysing was watching too. But what he saw on television, combined with his experiences at Rocketdyne, made him a skeptic.
The whole thing then seemed phony to me. I think it was an intuitive feeling that what was being shown was not real.
As he studied the footage more closely, he was shocked to find several inconsistencies. Kaysing observed that despite the clarity of deep space, the stars were missing from the black lunar sky. He saw the American flag waving, even though there is no air on the moon. And he discovered that there was no blast crater beneath the lunar lander, where its powerful rocket engine had fired. This evidence convinced Kaysing that we never sent a man to the moon.
What actually happened in my mind is that during the 60s, they said, if you can't make it, fake it.
But if the Apollo missions were fake, how was this monumental hoax accomplished? According to Kaysing, the launch of Apollo's Saturn V rocket was real. It just never sent astronauts to the moon. What about the still photography? Some say the design of the bulky spacesuits would have made it extremely difficult for the astronauts to operate their chest-mounted cameras. The man who designed these cameras is Jan Lundberg.
Once on the moon, on the lunar surface, in the dress, in the life support system, you couldn't see the camera. They couldn't bend their head that far down. They had no viewfinder, they had to aim by moving their body.
If the cameras were so difficult to manipulate, how were thousands of photos taken with crystal clarity and precise framing?
The pictures that we see that allegedly were taken on the moon are absolutely perfect.
But with closer examination, Kaysing says flaws begin to emerge.
Unfortunately, errors were made which are now being discovered.
Lighting is a major flaw in the lunar photos. Case in point, on the moon, the astronauts' only source of light was the sun.
They had no extra lighting, no flashes, no things like that.
Yet in this photograph from Apollo 14, the shadows are cast in different directions, suggesting multiple light sources.
The shadows cast by the rocks in the foreground should have been east-west, like the LEM shadows.
And in this photo from Apollo 17, again the shadows are pointing in different directions.
Outside in sunlight, shadows always run parallel with one another, so the shadows will never intersect.
Conspiracy theorists say it's not just the shadows that indicate the use of additional lights, but what has been photographed in the shadows. For example, here's an astronaut who descends into a huge shadow cast by the lunar module. Yet his entire body is still visible. How is it that he is not shrouded in darkness? Here's the same maneuver from another Apollo mission. Again, the astronaut is brightly lit in what is obviously dark shadow. And in this picture, the sun is directly behind the astronaut. His figure should be a silhouette. Yet even the smallest characteristics of his suit are recognizable.
It seems like he's standing in the spotlight. And I can't explain that. That escapes me. Why?
And finally, in this picture with the sun behind the lunar module, the front of the craft is clearly visible. The words United States are crisp and clear. How could these backlit pictures be so detailed?
It's because there's more than one light source, which means they're not on the moon.
Why do some of these images shot at different times and different places appear to have identical backgrounds? These two photos seem to have the same mountain backdrop, yet the lunar module is only present in one of them. Seemingly impossible, since the LEM never moved and its base remained even after the mission.
What a ride, what a ride.
Some suggest the same artificial backdrop was used when shooting two entirely separate pictures. Background discrepancies are also apparent in the lunar video.
The best evidence are some pictorial anomalies in the photographic record of the trip to the moon. There is one for Apollo 16 where the same shot, the same hill, appears in 2 different days.
This tape was shot on what was reported to be the first of Apollo 16's lunar excursions.
But it couldn't pick a better spot.
And this video was from the next day at a different location.
That is the most beautiful sight.
NASA claims the second location was 2.5 miles away. But when one video is superimposed over the other, the locations appear identical.
Oh yes, once again, you're listening to The Hour of the Time, and I'm still William Cooper. There's a sucker born every minute, said P.T. Barnum. And P.T. Barnum was absolutely right, and tonight I'm going to expose to you, once again, with new information, the biggest sucker con job of them all. Oh yes, I'm holding in my hand a new book. Remember, I've told you before, ladies and gentlemen, that whether I cannot prove whether or not any of our astronauts ever went to the moon, I can prove beyond any shadow of any doubt that the photographs and videotapes and the video coverage of the so-called Apollo landings on the moon are all fake. All of them, every single one. There's not one real photograph among the bunch that was ever taken on the moon. I can prove that beyond any shadow of a doubt, no problem. I have a degree in photography. It's easy. These people think we're so stupid they didn't even do it right. And back when they did it, they didn't have the special effects technology and the computer capability that they have now. I mean, if they tried this now, they could have really fooled us. But they couldn't wait. Now, like I said, I know there's a secret space program with a secret technology. And I believe we've been out there all over the place, to tell you the truth. I don't know where, I don't know when, I don't know exactly how, but I believe that we have. But I know and can prove that all of the photographs taken of the Apollo space program, the moon landings that were supposedly taken on the moon, and the videotape that was supposedly shot on the moon, and the film that was supposedly shot on the moon was not shot on the moon.
Some may say, I'm wishing my days away. No way, and if it's the price I pay, some say, tomorrow's another day. You stay, walking on the moon.
And put your hand on the Bible. Swear to God you walked on the moon.
Mr. Cybro, knowing you, that's probably a fake bite.
Even closer examination of the photos suggest evidence of doctoring. For reference, crosshairs were permanently etched into the lunar cameras, so they would have to appear on top of every image. But in this photo, a crosshair is behind a part of the lunar rover.
This situation is impossible and has to be the result of technical manipulation and doctoring of the image.
And in this photo from Apollo 11, the equipment in the foreground is covering the crosshair, not behind it. And in another from Apollo 12, the American flag is covering one crosshair, and the astronaut is covering the other.
Our research suggests that images of the Apollo landings are not a true and accurate record. In our view, the Apollo pictures were faked. Many of the images are replete with inconsistencies and anomalies.
In fact, Percy claims that when examined, these images suggest that man never went to the moon at all.
The noise level of a rocket engine is up into the 140, 150 decibel range. In other words, enormously loud. How would it be possible to hear astronauts' voices against the background of a running rocket engine?
Picking up some dust. 30 feet, 2.5 down. Straight shadow. 4 forward, drift into the right a little. Contact light. Okay, engine stop.
Just months before this historic landing, a prototype LEM was flight tested at Ellington Air Force Base. While NASA cameras record the test flight, Neil Armstrong struggles to control the unwieldy craft. Then, at approximately 300 feet, the lander flies wildly out of control. At the last second, Armstrong ejects. And floats to safety. If the lander was so unstable and difficult to fly in the controlled environment of Earth, then how could the LEM land 6 times flawlessly in the alien environment of the moon?
The LEM had a single engine mounted dead center, and then they had little push jets, thruster jets, a couple of them up on top. This was supposed to control their attitude as they came down. Well, I'll tell you a secret. The instant you moved your tail in that cabin an inch, you would change the load pattern, it would begin to tilt, and it would start that thing spinning.
Tranquility Base here.
If the lunar module landed with 10,000 pounds of thrust, why is there no blast crater?
To have a powerful rocket engine blast the surface of the moon, blasting away all of the dust, and then find footprints surrounding the lunar lander, that to me would be an impossibility.
Photo after photo reveals that the lunar surface surrounding the LEM is covered with footprints.
The fact that there's no blast crater under the LEM is one of the most conclusive pieces of evidence that I find supporting the hoax.
In fact, no sign of a blast crater is visible for any of the 6 lunar landings.
Then there's one other point. If they had truly landed on the moon, this dust would have then descended on the lunar lander, on the foot pads, and we find not a trace of dust on the foot pads. When I discovered that alone, I said, no way am I looking at a lunar lander that landed on the moon.
If there is no air or wind on the moon, why is this American flag waving?
The fact that the flag flaps on the moon where there's no atmosphere means that there must have been a little blast of wind out in Area 51 where they shot this.
Could these questionable images simply be the result of astronauts struggling to plant the flag into the lunar surface? Or is there more going on than meets the eye? Casing points out that the LEM's departure from the lunar surface is even more suspicious.
In the footage of the ascent stage going up, what you don't see is an exhaust plume coming out of the rocket engine nozzle.
What a ride, what a ride.
But what do we see? We see the ascent stage suddenly pop up without any exhaust plume whatsoever, as though it were jerked up by a cable.
It's absolutely unreal.
Although it appears that the astronauts are moving in the moon's gravity, which is 1/6 that of the Earth, Percy notes that when the speed of the film is doubled, the astronauts appear to be running as if in Earth's gravity. Also, when the footage of the lunar rover is doubled in speed, it looks as if it's driving here on Earth. Some say the astronauts could never even have survived the trip.
The reason why they couldn't go to the moon is because of a phenomenon that few people know about called the Van Allen radiation belts.
500 miles above the Earth, these bands of intense radiation surround our planet and are thousands of miles thick.
Any human being traveling through the Van Allen belt would have been rendered either extremely ill or actually killed by the radiation within a short time thereafter.
Other than the Apollo missions, no other manned space flight has attempted to pass through this deadly radiation.
Every manned mission in history, Gemini, Mercury, Skylab, the Space Shuttle, has been below the radiation belt, all except going to the moon.
To protect the astronauts, the capsule would have needed 6 feet of lead shielding, according to physicist Ralph Rene.
Obviously, the only shielding they had was the literally paper-thin outer hull of aluminum, and their suits consisting of glass fiber, some aluminum fibers, and silicon rubber.
It's very interesting concerning radiation that the astronauts were protected by a thin film of aluminum when here on Earth they put a lead shield on us when they take a dental X-ray.
Radiation are horrific, ranging from hair loss to cancer to death. The solar flares had no adverse effect on the Apollo 16 crew.
NASA had another problem, and one is that the moon's surface is totally inhospitable to man. If you do it in the dark, and that includes any part of the shadow of the spacecraft itself, the temperatures go down to 250 degrees below zero. In the sun, the temperatures go up to 250 degrees above zero.
Rene also theorizes that the astronauts' liquid-cooled spacesuits could not have provided sufficient protection from the intense heat and radiation. Bart Sabrell insists that most NASA employees knew nothing of the deception.
Very few people at NASA knew. The thing is so departmentalized. You got the person building the bolts in Houston, or doing this in Seattle, or doing this in Florida. No one knows the full picture. So, you had no one seeing the full picture of anything except a handful of people.
I would say that my conviction that Apollo was a fake was really not according to one specific piece of evidence, but it was cumulative. This whole thing was a fake.
Mr. Seibel, you do not deserve answers.
I mean, do you have Neil Armstrong interviewed already?
No, he doesn't want to be interviewed.
Well, I know. You're so full of shit, I can't believe it. If you show this publicly, you're open for a lawsuit. Okay?
What was the temperature like in the spacecraft on the moon?
Well, the lunar module that was the vehicle that we landed on the moon, it was just like this room we're sitting in here right now. We had a
Any ill effects from the Van Allen radiation belts?
No, now I'm not sure we went far enough out to encounter the Van Allen radiation belt. Maybe we did. I know how people are. It's okay. Well, take your stuff and get the fuck out.
Yeah, right here's fine. I'm Bart with ABC Digital.
How you doing? You want me to knock you in the head?
I got to a point on my 2 flights to the moon, particularly my last flight when I actually made the moon my home. I've got a book telling me I didn't go to the moon, that thick, okay? There's a book there when you can't see stars in the daytime and the shadows interrupt. I don't give a damn about all that shit.
And a liar and a thief. This video, I'm not quite following it on right now.
I don't hit people, but you're going to be on the deck unless you get
I'm heading out. I appreciate it.
and get the hell out of the house.
What stars we could see? I don't remember seeing anything.
9 steps are what you take walking on the moon. I hope my legs don't break walking on.
This time I'd like to introduce the Apollo 11 crew. Astronauts Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, Edwin Aldrin.
Bob, what the hell you doing? What the fuck does Stanley Kubrick have to do with astronauts and movement? Who the hell you fooling? Fuck you and this whole stupid flat earth movement. Well, you don't like assuming if it's science proven. You a college student shouldn't be assuming green screen, sound stage, soundproofing. Time to film a movie shoot. Gotta use my tools in a glass cage, astronaut suit, footprint don't match the boot. Been to the moon once and ain't been back since. And I'm just trying to figure out where the tax dollars went. NASA.
You want me to knock you in the head?
Well, I want you to swear to God on the Bible that you walked on the moon. Okay? If you walked on the moon, we're given the opportunity to swear to God that you walked on the moon.
I'm going to give you the opportunity to get the hell knocked out of you, so don't leave me alone.
I don't
walking on.
Well, I take your stuff and get the fuck out.
Not a huge fan of the award for the best rapper, but they give the Moon Man award to the best actor. Guess we must go straight to the source. Let's ask NASA. How do you explain the occurrence of lunar waves? Why do we only see 1/2 of the lunar face? How do you explain air bubbles you view in space? Why is it so important to lie to the human race? Million-mile internet that travels light years, but they can show a space shuttle re-enter the atmosphere. Okay, to blast off, you gotta practice Freemasonry, an acronym that stands for not a space agency.
Some may say, I'm wishing my days away. No way. And if it's the price I pay, some say, tomorrow's another day. You stay walking on the moon.
And put your hand on the Bible. Swear to God you walked on the moon.
Mr. Cybro, knowing you, that's probably a fake part.
Well, you're talking to the wrong guy. Why don't you talk to the administrator at NASA? We're passengers. We're guys going on a flight.
And the shadows interrupt. I don't give a damn about all that shit.
God, please, no!